In a heartbreaking turn of events, Princess Kate Middleton has once again found herself at the center of a deeply emotional moment that's left the entire nation in sorrow. Known for her grace, strength, and quiet resilience, Kate has faced challenges before. But what happened today has touched people in a way few royal stories ever have. As details emerge, the truth behind her pain paints a picture of courage amid tragedy. So, what really happened to Catherine today? Stay tuned for the full story. The silence behind the gates. Inside the grand walls of Kensington Palace, something had shifted. The air, once filled with the quiet rhythm of royal routine, now felt heavy. Charged with a tension that no one dared to name, those who worked closest to the family described the mood as cold and unnervingly quiet. Even the most composed courtiers, people who had weathered decades of scandal, began to whisper behind closed doors. Staff avoided each other's eyes. Corridors that once echoed with movement now carried only muted footsteps and hurried whispers. Schedules changed suddenly. Meetings were cancelled without reason, and security became noticeably tighter. It was as if the palace itself had drawn a curtain across its heart, and behind that curtain, something was breaking. The first real sign came when the Princess of Wales, known for her unwavering dedication, began missing engagements she would never ordinarily forgo. Commonwealth Day, the Easter service, public appearances that had long been part of her identity. Her absence was not just unusual, it was alarming. Each missed event deepened the unease. Then came the moment that truly stirred the public's concern. Prince William attending the funeral of King Constantine alone. The cameras caught his expression, restrained, respectful, but unmistakably strained. It was a silence that spoke volumes. Still, the palace said nothing. No elaboration, no warmth, just the same carefully worded statement repeated through official channels. And with every unanswered question, speculation began to fill the void. The media world, trained to respect royal boundaries, found itself cornered between duty and doubt. Some reports suggested complications from surgery. Others whispered of a far more serious medical crisis. Online, theories multiplied by the minute. Social media became a frenzy of detectives, each dissecting the smallest clue, the tone of a statement, the absence of a photograph, the strange quiet in the royal calendar. Hashtags surged. Conspiracy videos flooded timelines. What began as curiosity had turned into collective anxiety. And yet, the palace didn't flinch. It was a masterclass in silence. Controlled, deliberate, unyielding. But that control came at a cost. For the first time in years, the monarchy seemed to lose its grip on the story. The public, once willing to trust, began to doubt.
In January, I underwent major abdominal surgery in London, and at the time, it was thought that my condition was non-cancerous.
Even seasoned royal correspondents known for their discretion began to speak out. "What is the palace hiding?" they asked. And why? Because deep down, people felt it. This wasn't just about privacy or recovery. It was something deeper, something that reached beyond press releases and royal protocol. Behind those closed doors was pain, raw and unguarded, that even centuries of royal discipline couldn't disguise forever. And then, the silence finally broke. It didn't happen in a grand hall or on a balcony draped with flags. It happened on a simple bench, in a quiet garden, under the open sky. When the screen flickered to life, the world saw her. Not the princess in pearls and ceremony, but Kate herself, pale, calm, and heartbreakingly human. Her voice trembled as she spoke, revealing a truth that left millions in tears. After weeks of suffocating silence, the world finally exhaled. But the story, her story, had only just begun. So what really pushed Kate Middleton to speak out in that quiet garden? And what secrets might still be hidden? Stay tuned. The day the silence broke. On the morning of March 22, 2024, the world stopped to listen. The palace released a short video, barely a few minutes long, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. There was no royal grandeur, no formal introduction, no elaborate backdrop, just Catherine, the Princess of Wales, sitting quietly in a simple outdoor setting. The sunlight fell softly across her face, yet behind her calm composure lay something deeper, something fragile and real. Her voice was steady, her tone measured, but it was her eyes that told the story before her words did. When she finally spoke, the truth came like a thunderclap. The cancer had been there all along, hidden, silent, and unsuspected, discovered only after her earlier surgery for what had been described as a non-cancerous abdominal condition. The world listened in stunned disbelief. Every word she spoke carried the weight of both heartbreak and courage. This was not the poised figure the public had come to know through years of perfect appearances and polite smiles. This was Kate, simply Kate, a woman, trying to hold herself together while her world shifted beneath her feet. She did not speak as a royal, nor as a future queen. She spoke as a wife who had to look into her husband's eyes and deliver unthinkable news, as a mother trying to protect her children from fear, as a human being confronting something far greater than herself. There was no performance, no attempt to soften the blow with royal phrasing. Instead, she spoke plainly, explaining that she had begun preventative chemotherapy and was focusing on staying strong for her family, for herself, and for the countless people who had always stood by her. It was honesty stripped of polish, and it hit the world like a wave. Within minutes, social media was flooded, not with gossip, but with grief, compassion, and admiration. Millions wept, some in living rooms, others in newsrooms, watching the moment replay again and again. Catherine, the woman so often seen as composed and unreachable, had revealed her most vulnerable truth. And in doing so, she became something profoundly different. Not just a princess, but a symbol of courage in its most human form. Her message ended with a plea, not an order. Privacy for her family, especially for her 3 young children. The tone wasn't defiant, it was gentle, maternal. The world, which had been demanding answers for weeks, suddenly grew quiet. Even the harshest tabloids held back. It was a rare moment when empathy outweighed intrusion. Behind the scenes, the reason for the long silence became clearer. The palace had waited for her to start treatment, to regain enough strength to face the world on her own terms. This wasn't about control, it was about survival. Yet, the delay stirred unease. Questions began to surface. Why had the truth been withheld? Who within the royal circle had known? And when? The revelation answered one mystery, but unearthed another. Insiders whispered that even Prince William had not known the full extent of her diagnosis until weeks after her surgery. For a couple once seen as unshakable, this revelation hinted at an emotional rift, one born not of distance, but of devastating shock. As the world absorbed the truth, the palace's polished image began to crack. The silence had finally been broken, but what lay beneath it was only beginning to surface. And what did this sudden revelation truly unleash within the palace walls? And how deep does the fracture in the royal couple run? Keep watching. A crown under strain. The moment Catherine, Princess of Wales, revealed her diagnosis, the world felt it. The compassion, the shock, the heartbreak. It rippled through every corner of the globe. But inside the palace, the emotional fallout ran even deeper, cutting through walls long built to contain crisis. For behind the carefully orchestrated announcement lay a truth few were prepared to confront. Prince William, her husband, and the future king had not been told about her cancer until weeks after her surgery. At first, the revelation seemed impossible. How could the man closest to her, the one she had leaned on through every public challenge, have been left in the dark about something so life-altering? Yet insiders confirmed it. The palace machinery, fearful of leaks and driven by its obsession with control, had moved too quickly and too mechanically. In its haste to manage public perception, it had silenced even those who mattered most. What began as a medical crisis had become something larger, a royal failure trust. The invisible thread that bound both the family and the institution had snapped. Behind the gilded gates, whispers grew louder. Staff spoke of chaos, of senior advisors caught off guard, of messages lost in the chain of command. The once seamless choreography of royal life now stumbled. Protocol faltered. Strategy meetings turned into crisis sessions, and just as William tried to absorb the crushing truth of his wife's illness, another devastating blow fell upon the monarchy. King Charles had also been diagnosed with cancer, two battles unfolding at once, the sovereign and his heir each facing the same terrifying fight. It was a moment no royal handbook could prepare them for overnight. Duty collided with mortality. Advisors scrambled to contain panic while projecting composure, or nothing. Inside the palace, the divide widened. Some argued that honesty was the only way forward. Others clung to the old code of silence. Meetings grew tense, eye contact fleeting. William, caught between the crown's expectations and his love for Kate, found himself suffocating under the weight of both. In public, he smiled, shook hands, and performed the role of a steady heir. But behind the polite gestures lay exhaustion and quiet despair. Every camera flash felt heavier, every official engagement a test of endurance. The public began to notice. Commentators observed the shadows beneath his eyes, the hollow tone in his voice. Newspapers asked the questions no one inside dared to speak aloud. Why had updates been so vague? Why did the palace seem distant, even cold? Where was the humanity in an institution that so often spoke of duty and compassion? But answers never came. Instead, the palace's official statements grew shorter, more mechanical, sentences crafted to say everything and reveal nothing. Each day of silence only deepened suspicion, and through it all, Catherine quietly disappeared from view. Her once full calendar of engagements dissolved. No appearances, no photographs, no sightings. While the world speculated, she was locked in the rhythm of chemotherapy, an unrelenting cycle of fatigue, pain, and fragile recovery. Her days were no longer shaped by ceremony, but by survival. The palace may have shielded her from the public eye, but it could not protect her from the toll of treatment. Her hair thinned, her strength wavered. Yet through the stillness of those unseen months, one truth remained. Behind the grandeur and silence, the Princess of Wales was fighting for her life. But what really happened behind palace walls during Kate's hidden battle? And could this secret struggle change the monarchy forever? Stay glued. The mistake that shook the palace. As the months slipped by, the silence surrounding Catherine, Princess of Wales, grew louder than any statement the palace could have issued. The world longed for even the smallest glimpse of her. A photograph, a voice, a sign that she was healing. But none came. Inside the palace walls, quiet arguments erupted between two opposing camps. Some advisors insisted that transparency was no longer optional, that every day without news chipped away at the public's faith. Others, fiercely protective, argued that her privacy must come before all else. The result was a stalemate, an uneasy standstill where no one spoke, and every decision felt like a risk. Catherine, meanwhile, remained out of sight, not from indifference, but from necessity. She was fighting for her life. Yet even in that struggle, her spirit refused to dim. Deprived of public appearances, she found small, personal ways to stay connected. Handwritten letters began arriving in hospitals and cancer wards, bearing her familiar signature. They were messages of strength and hope, sent quietly to those walking the same path she now walked. At home, she poured what energy she had into motherhood, reading bedtime stories, offering comfort, and keeping a sense of normalcy alive for her 3 children. She was no longer the polished public figure seen at charity galas or royal engagements. She was simply Kate, a mother, a patient, a woman enduring the hardest season of her life. But while she withdrew, the weight fell on Prince William. With his wife invisible to the world, he became the face and the backbone of the monarchy. His calendar remained relentless. Ceremonies, diplomatic visits, and appearances that required constant grace under pressure. Yet beneath the surface, exhaustion showed. Those close to him whispered that he was quieter, thinner, more solemn. In public, he smiled for the cameras. In private, he carried the crushing burden of 2 roles: heir to the throne and husband to a woman in pain. Every space beside him served as a haunting reminder of the partner who once stood there. Still, the palace's approach remained unchanged. The strategy was control, contain the message, limit the noise, but silence, however well-meant, is a dangerous strategy, and as summer faded into autumn, one tiny oversight would shatter the fragile calm they had worked so hard to maintain. In June 2025, the Royal Ascot program, an event synonymous with precision, tradition, and royal presence, was printed and distributed across Britain. Buried within the official carriage procession lineup was one name that sent shockwaves through the kingdom: the Princess of Wales. It was the confirmation the world had been waiting for. Kate was returning, or so it seemed. Within hours, headlines erupted with joy. Social media is flooded with celebration and relief. For a moment, the nation exhaled, but then nothing. No photographs, no pre-event coverage, no subtle palace hints. And just as anticipation reached its peak, a blunt statement cut through the excitement like a knife. The Princess of Wales would not attend the listing, the palace said, had been an administrative error. The reaction was instant and fierce. How could one of the world's most choreographed institutions make such a mistake? Why wait until the eve of the event to correct it? Had Kate planned to attend and withdrawn at the last minute? Or had she never been involved at all? Within hours, the hashtag #WhereIsKate returned to the top of global trends. But this time, the tone had shifted. The sympathy that once surrounded her absence was now laced with frustration. The public felt misled. Their brief moment of hope turned into disappointment. The error, as officials called it, had done more than spoil an event. It had reopened every wound the silence had created. And what really happened behind the palace walls to spark global outrage? And could Kate's next move change everything? Stay with us. A fragile return to light. In the wake of the Royal Ascot blunder, the palace's carefully maintained silence began to crack under the weight of public suspicion. What once appeared as compassion for a recovering princess now seemed like manipulation. The narrative of privacy turned sour, interpreted instead as control. Old conspiracies, long buried beneath layers of royal decorum, came surging back to life, whispered in headlines, dissected in online forums, and debated endlessly on morning television. Inside the royal communications offices, chaos unfolded. Emails flew across departments, meetings ran into the night, and press officers scrambled to patch the widening gap between truth and perception. Damage control became a desperate art form. Senior aides fed vague reassurances to friendly journalists, crafting soft explanations about administrative oversights and miscommunication. But the problem was no longer about the princess's absence. It was about something deeper: trust. Once fractured, trust cannot be mended by a statement or a press release. The Royal Ascot mishap wasn't just a scheduling error, it was a rupture, reopening wounds the palace had only just managed to close. The fragile bond between the monarchy and its people trembled again, threatening to snap entirely. And yet, amid the disarray, hope quietly found a way back in. It arrived not with royal ceremony, but with a moment of deeply human triumph. By September 2024, after months hidden from the world and fighting in silence, Princess Kate completed chemotherapy. There was no televised announcement, no balcony wave, no carefully orchestrated fanfare, just the quiet dignity of survival. For those who had prayed for her from afar, it was a collective sigh of relief, a moment that restored faith not in the institution, but in the woman herself. Then, in January 2025, came the words the world had been waiting for. The Princess of Wales was officially in remission. The news swept across continents like sunlight, breaking through a long winter. It wasn't just a medical milestone. It was emotional vindication for millions who had clung to her story as a symbol of resilience. But recovery, inside the gilded walls of royalty, was never going to be easy. Every appearance was now choreographed with precision. This wasn't a return to royal duty. It was a reintroduction, a careful reawakening of her public presence. Her team, balancing medical advice with royal expectation, designed a series of brief, meaningful appearances. No lengthy speeches, no unplanned encounters, just moments that reminded the world she was still here. Her presence, fragile yet fierce, became its own message of strength. When she stepped alongside Prince William at the Commonwealth Day service in March 2025, the emotion in the room was electric. Every eye watched not with judgment but with awe, admiration for a woman who had walked through fire and returned with quiet grace. And then, in June, came another glimpse, a short appearance during the Garter Day procession. Just 45 minutes in public, but it was enough to reignite the nation's spirit. Her smile was soft, her movements measured, but her composure radiated resilience. In that brief moment, she didn't just return as a princess, she stood as a survivor, a symbol of endurance cloaked in elegance, reminding Britain that even in silence, strength can speak louder than words. So now, with Kate's brief but powerful return, could the monarchy truly survive this shift, and what will happen next? Redefining royal life. This was not a triumphant return in the traditional sense. It was a careful recalibration, a measured step back into a world that had once defined her, but now felt irrevocably changed. Behind the polished facades of palaces and public appearances, fragility persisted. Each engagement required meticulous coordination between her medical needs and the relentless rhythm of royal obligations. One missed hour of rest could cascade into days of exhaustion. A single wave to the crowd might cost weeks of careful recovery. The stakes were no longer just about protocol. They were personal, profound, and permanent. For Kate, stepping back into the public eye meant confronting a world that had once demanded perfection. Now, as a woman who had faced her own mortality, the composure seen on cameras and in photographs masked the true cost of every appearance. Every smile, every handshake, every brief interaction with the public was layered with effort, strategy, and the weight of lived experience. The crown she had been groomed to wear no longer fit the same way. The life she had known, once seamless and scripted, had shifted in ways that could never be undone. Months of careful absence, private resilience, and strategic re-emergence had transformed her role within the monarchy. Kate Middleton was no longer the constant figure of effortless poise, sweeping through hospitals, gala halls, and charity events with practiced grace. Her schedule, once overflowing with advocacy campaigns, spontaneous visits, and hands-on projects, was now dictated by a new, inescapable force: her health. Every planned appearance was preceded by the question that once would have been unimaginable: can she manage it? If the answer was no, there was no forced smile, no rushed replacement, no compromise. This shift echoed through the palace. Surprise visits, long speeches, and unplanned engagements became rare, replaced by carefully filtered appearances. Doctors, personal aides, and senior advisors reviewed every commitment for physical strain, emotional toll, and timing. Projects she had nurtured with dedication, particularly those close to her heart, like her early childhood initiatives, were either postponed or handed to others. Her personal touch, once celebrated as the hallmark of her style, had to be moderated in favor of her well-being. Passion and commitment remained, but health dictated the pace, the scope, and the presence. And yet, within this transformation lay something deeper than endurance or survival. For the first time, the monarchy had to acknowledge human limits. Duty could no longer override personal suffering. Appearance could no longer be prioritized over health. Tradition and optics, long the lifeblood of royal operations, were being reshaped by necessity. The palace was learning to bend, to adapt, to accommodate the vulnerability of the person behind the title. Kate's journey, born of struggle and resilience, was quietly rewriting what it meant to serve in a life dictated not just by expectation, but by survival. The result was a new monarchy, one tempered by humanity, where the rhythm of royal life no longer bulldozed through illness, and where personal well-being began to command the same respect as protocol and pageantry. Kate Middleton's return was measured, but it was also monumental, not for spectacle, but for the quiet assertion that even royalty must live, recover, and redefine their path on their own terms. Now, could Kate Middleton's measured return secretly be reshaping the monarchy forever? And what consequences will ripple through the royal family and the nation? Keep watching. The princess as the monarchy's compass. This wasn't merely a pause in royal duties, it was a reckoning, and at its center stood Kate Middleton, For generations, senior royals had navigated illness, grief, and scandal with minimal acknowledgement, relying on ceremony and silence to maintain an image of unshakable stability. Kate's approach, however, marked a profound shift. She redefined what it meant to be a working royal, not through presence alone, but through personal strength and deliberate choices. In quiet, behind-the-scenes meetings, palace officials began to reshape the model of engagement. For the first time, a health-first framework was being implemented, and advisors were working with her, not merely around her. Doctors held equal weight to press teams. Her voice, once measured against centuries of tradition, now guided every decision about her public life. Her return would be on her terms. She would step back into the spotlight only when she was ready. It was not defiance, but dignity, a declaration that the monarchy could respect humanity within its ceremonial machine. Predictably, critics murmured that royal responsibilities could not revolve around a single individual's medical needs. Yet, public perception quickly turned. Admirers recognized her courage. What they witnessed was leadership redefined.
This, of course, came as a huge shock, and William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family.
A future queen who understood her worth even when absent, a royal who valued authenticity over optics, a woman brave enough to place healing above duty. But Kate's absence illuminated cracks across the institution. She was more than a princess. She was the bridge connecting the monarchy's history with its future. Without her, those fissures became impossible to ignore. Prince William, suddenly tasked with the dual roles of father and future king, struggled under the mounting pressure. Where once the couple embodied modern royal partnership, William now attended events alone. His charisma dimmed under the strain. Speeches grew shorter, smiles more reserved, presence less commanding. The public, accustomed to seeing their partnership as a symbol of stability, felt the imbalance acutely. To fill the void, palace strategists mobilized. Queen Camilla assumed a more visible role, while Princess Beatrice was nudged into broader duties. Both carried titles and responsibilities, but neither commanded the public's connection in the way Kate did. Her absence was not merely operational, it was profoundly emotional. She had been a unifying force, blending tradition with modern sensibilities, and without her, the gap widened noticeably. The effect on younger generations was particularly striking. Polls conducted throughout late 2024 and early 2025 revealed a sharp decline in support for the monarchy among 18 to 35-year-olds. Those who had seen Kate as relatable, the mother, the quiet reformer, the advocate, now felt alienated. It was not only her elegance or fashion sense that they missed, but her humanity, the sense that royalty could feel real and accessible. The palace had maintained its polished exterior, but the absence of the Princess of Wales exposed a truth that could no longer be concealed. Monarchy, without its human bridge, risked losing touch with the very people it was meant to inspire. Kate's silence, once a shield for recovery, had revealed how central she was, not just to William, not just to the family, but to the heart of the institution itself. Her quiet strength had always been the compass pointing toward balance, connection, and resilience. And in its absence, the monarchy began to feel the tremors of a fragile foundation. So what do you think caused Kate Middleton's sudden withdrawal to reshape the monarchy itself? And how will her return redefine its future? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.